We're going to do things a little differently on this specific episode. Our dear friend John Vasos has passed away. I would encourage you to stop listening to the audio if possible and go straight to the YouTube channel. And the reason is because there's a lot of visual aids specific for this episode. This was not intended to be a podcast. Instead, it was an interview for information and data as it relates to the Acura NSX from John, so that we can use the transcription and learn about the car from the mind of someone who's not only very opinionated, but very knowledgeable about the Acura NSX. This was, to its core, just a phone call between two friends. The only edits that I did was I removed his coughing where I was able to do, and I beeped out one of his customers' names. But that person and those close to that person will know exactly who it is when we start talking about it. This was not my last time talking to John, but it was our last time recording. It's crazy because you look up and 2 weeks go by, a month goes by, 2 months go by. But with him, we talked, but it just wasn't the right time. His health was in and out from that moment moving forward. It was a shocker to see him at NSXPO. He had to leave NSXPO early. But the night before he left, I got a heads up that he would be leaving. So I went to his hotel room and we spent 30 minutes and had a great conversation. And when I walked out of that room, I felt that was probably the last time I would get to see him. After NSXPO, I reached out to him a few more times via phone call, text messages. And I know that with updates from Peter and Jake and Ajay, that, his health was declining, and there's just times where he couldn't answer the phone, maybe didn't want to answer the phone. So I remained fortunate that I had that time with him before NSXPO. And I know a lot of people did not have that time. Maybe you didn't attend, maybe you didn't know he was leaving. But the video portion of this is for you all to get to see the guy, the man over the years. But what I did was reached out to a few people really close to John and asked them to submit photos, because if I would have asked everybody on social media, I could have ended up with 1,000 photos. Really watching it on YouTube, you get to kind of follow along, and I think it's a visual treat. And I wanted to give thanks to everyone who contributed, people that posted online. In his memory, I saw some photos and I reached out to them individually and said, hey, can I use these photos? These are great. So I hopefully, if you can, take the time, go straight to the YouTube. So that's YouTube at Hard Parking, or you can search Hard Parking Media, John Vasos, and you will get the result. So this is raw. It's two people talking. There is some language, and I hope you enjoy this. This is Hard Parking, brought to you by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm your host, Jhae Pfenning. Today's show is going to be a little different. You've never really experienced a show like this by design. Right now, I'm being joined by my good friend and an even closer friend of John Vasos, Jake Cole. Jake, welcome to the show officially. Sorry this is your first official time being on it.
It's all right. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Of course. The reason why I wanted you to be a part of this, the John episodes, a lot of the listeners have become well acquainted to him, not even just the NSX world, but beyond. I want you to know that I don't think any of these recordings would have ever existed if you didn't approach me about capturing John's knowledge a few years ago. I may have gotten him into, one episode, but the two that we've had so far were just so iconic. And I was able to capture, because of your initiative that you had asked about doing, I was able to capture last April a good conversation as we finally, the third phone call in, finally were able to get into the weeds of what it is to be an NSX owner and boring to most people details of the car that we all love so much.
Well, I will probably always be eternally grateful to you for taking me up on that, because it's something that I struggled with internally for quite a while, just having spent the number of, late nights at the shop with John, watching him working on, either my car or his race NSX or, any combination of different NSXs or, a lot Acuras, but, no shortage of just fancy cars coming through his place just for him. He's a one-man show. And I just thought, someday if I'm a YouTuber or a podcaster or a blogger or something, I need to document this because, John is just such a special human being to have walked this earth. And I feel so blessed to, have gotten close to him over the years, but he's so principled, and he has his very strong opinions based on, what he knows from having an entire lifetime and career in the automotive industry in the car dealership world. And so, thanks to you really for having the capabilities and, jumping into this whole, hard parking podcast world that you've done and do so well. So thank you. Thanks to Jhae Pfenning.
No, man, that's all you, man. It's just the amount of people that he's touched, and, he just left us Tuesday at 10:05 a.m. and just a beautiful person. And, this episode is, 100% car talk, and it's 100% for the NSX owners and hopefully other car people out there. If they could just grab just a 20% of this guy's work ethic and knowledge, it's just going to serve them better in life, I think.
Absolutely.
So again, I wanted to thank you for that. And, rest in peace, Mr. Vasos, man. Hell of a guy. I'll tell you this. So last night I'm doing this on a Thursday, but last night on One Drink Wednesday, can you guess what I had?
Hopefully some Clase Azul.
No, even more old school than that. I went to the grocery store and bought like one of those little alcoholic servings of Bacardi.
I was going to say, okay, yeah, Bacardi, yes, and I should have guessed that. We celebrated with Clase Azul, Tuesday night, but I don't think there will be a shortage of Bacardi Cokes.
Yeah.
He's that was his go-to, and I think he's had a lot to say about that too. So, and then we've evolved that to tequila Cokes too now with Batangas, but. Yes,
tequila and did you say tequila and Cokes?
Tequila and Mexican Coke, yeah.
Oh.
With some lime.
I guess I get to try that one next time I'm around, huh?
Yeah.
I'll defer to you guys.
It's a treat for sure. He loved them.
Yeah.
But you can't take away his Bacardi because that was his go-to, when you're out and about, because you could find it everywhere.
No. So that's the official wedding reception open bar drink, if available.
Yes.
Given there's no typically good choices. So, thanks again, Jake. Thank you so much for kind of being, because really we both bought our NSXs basically at the same time, and you already had that relationship with John, and that's how I'd met John. Really, we kind of came into this world at the same time as it relates to that. You and Peter and Leon, and even Dr. Ajay. These last few months, it's just a blessing to be in that circle and hear about those updates almost as if I was there. So I can't imagine, being boots on the ground that close to the situation. You're a strong guy for that.
Thanks. Yep. He didn't have a lot of immediate family around. His brother did a lot of the caretaking in his final stages, but we just tried to band together and do what we could to be that family for him as he, helped cultivate the NSX family that he did for so many years.
Well, when you hear this, it'll be coming out soon. When you hear this, I know you're going to appreciate it because you like getting into those weeds. And I left some fun nuggets in there after I'd screened it. So I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I listened to it, at least one, but I think I've listened to all of the John Vasos conversations that you've gotten, and you definitely got some gold there. So I'm looking forward to this one.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for joining.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
And I can't hear him. Why can't I hear him?
Because you have me muted. You don't want to hear me.
No, I mean, I don't want to hear you, but...
Nice.
How'd your appointment go yesterday?
Good. I have to go back again next week, but no biggie.
No biggie, yeah.
No biggie.
It's just appointments.
Just appointments.
So I figured...
Get to see the nice nurses.
How'd it go with Matt's birthday?
Oh, went really well.
Yeah.
He was he was completely caught off guard. There had to been 90 people there.
Wow.
And you know how Peter's collection hall has that front room.
Yeah.
And the doors were closed, and it was primarily me and Leah and Jake and his family, there to greet him. It's like, so then Peter and I opened the doors, and the place is decorated. All these people. Matt was literally in tears. He was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
He was totally caught off guard.
That was the big 4-0?
So, big 4-0.
Jeez.
I can't even remember my 40th.
I'll never forget mine.
Oh, really?
So we'd only been here for, I don't know, a couple of years. I consider that just moving here.
Yeah.
Within our first year and a half. And we went to Vegas. And apparently my wife had invited a bunch of people, but only one other couple. 2 couples showed up. One was one of my new work buddies from here and his wife. And then the other one was another friend of mine and his girlfriend at the time, who they eventually got married and now they're divorced. But we never actually saw the second couple because they got into a fight and went back home before my birthday dinner and everything. So it was just me and another couple for my 40th. And I'm pretty petty about stuff like that because I thought I had some great friends, and your 40th is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And for no one to fucking show up, So something I have to get over, and I think I'm slowly getting over it. But every time someone's like, hey, man, we're throwing a 40th, especially if it's one of my homies, I'm like, fuck you. Where the fuck were you at when I turned 40, you bitch? But life, finances, planning, all that goes into it,
Yeah, true. It's not that you're not loved. I mean, it's just...
You're just not loved, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured today we'll jump into the whole, I think we talked about it because you started talking about car and buying it on, I guess if you buy it online, that's technically sight unseen, right? Or is sight unseen like, hey man, I got a buddy selling a car, do you want it? Sure, I'll take it.
Well,
sort of, but not really.
No, not really. I mean, we can go through a bunch of different scenarios, bring a trailers, maybe one of those sites that it's quite popular.
How about, so then we'll just say, buying a car online. You can't physically see it, but you have pictures and stuff. What are you looking out for? What can't you anticipate? And once you get it, what are you going to look at?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. There's a lot of things that go into it, and we can discuss that. Back when I had the dealership, I got phone calls from people all over the country. And there's a lot that went into it as far as trying to protect the client from the buyer. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but we can discuss that.
Well, this will be buyer centric, because my thought about this is for our website, we don't want to just have everything locked. We want people to have access to certain things. If you already have an NSX, it's good. And if you're thinking about getting an NSX, you should have access for general information. Like, here's what you need to look for. Here's what a PPI will do. Here's what it won't do for you type of deals. And I think you were saying that it's in kind of a more rough condition in person than it was depicted to be online. So,
right. I won't bring his name up.
Yeah.
For sake, but, the Ford GT I just worked on is another example. Bought bring a trailer. Car looked great until we got the car, and then noticed that there's some issues with the paint on the hood, and it started bubbling. And the previous owner had said that the front bumper had been repainted. But, all these things started cropping up. And continually trying to ask for, well, we need the service records. Oh, well, I moved and, they're boxed up. And so this has been going on for 8 months. And anyhow, we can discuss that too. It's just, it's an unfortunate situation. So we basically had to, or I had to, go through the car as though it had never been serviced in 32,000 miles. Some of it could be tested out and some of it couldn't be. We just did it out of not knowing. And I'd like to discuss that too. Maintaining service records.
Yeah.
Which most owners are horrible at having their records stored, besides jammed in their glove box, or God knows what they do with them. But it does create an issue down the road when you go to sell a car and the person says, well, do you have the service records? Well, no. Well, that immediately throws up a red flag. And it's, if you have the documentation, it makes the sale so much easier for buyers and sellers because it's what people want to see.
All right. So so I've jotted down buying in person, buying online, keeping service records. And let's see, there's a checklist of stuff we can hit. We don't obviously have to get to all of them today. Of that group, what's something that you want to hit first? And these aren't podcast things. These are going to pretty much transcript it out for reading and education for somebody, documentation purposes.
Yeah.
Let's go to the scenario of person sees it at an online auction or they see it for sale online. They don't have the ability to actually see it in person. They have to rely on photos and whatever the seller has listed.
Right. So, as I found in the past on working on cars that have been bought online, whether it be through, marketplace or, bring a trailer or whatever it may be.
Yeah, eBay.
Yeah, there's so many different places. The problem is, which I've found, I'm looking at the photos on the site, and it appears everything looks normal. You can kind of see bolster wear, but it's not real clear, and the body looks straight, from a distance. But then I get the car, client sends it to me, and I start looking at it and going, what the hell? I mean, the fenders have got chips in it, the hood's got chips in it, the lower front bumper was repainted terribly. And I go back to the site and I'm looking at the pictures going, how the hell did I miss this? But they're taking at such an angle or at such a distance, you can't pick it up. It looks normal from a distance until you get it in front of you, and it's just like, wait a minute here. So in cases, and I've seen it happen on Bring a Trailer, people who are commenting on a particular car will ask the seller, could you give me a more specific photo of this body part or the interior, like seat bolster, more of a close-up so I can actually see what the wear pattern's like. You need to be specific. If something strikes you kind of odd, then get more detail.
Yeah. Because some people are going to be a little more educated on what they're looking at, and some people aren't. They're just going to be excited to buy it.
Well, on certain sites, like on Bring a Trailer, if an NSX is on there, there's going to be a lot of people from the NSX community commenting on the car. And they're a major asset to picking out things some owners or buyers might not even realize is an issue. The snap ring issue snapping on a transmission. It'll be brought up. And normally if a person who's selling an NSX is knowledgeable, they'll provide a photo of that transmission number so people can look it up and see, yes, it's out of the snapping range or it's in the snapping range.
And for our readers, what does that mean?
Well, during 91, 92, the range of transmissions that were included in that was somewhat limited. And part of it was, as these cases were manufactured, the cutting tool that put the groove in the case would wear and cause the groove to be bigger than they wanted it to be. So they understood that the tooling machine that was cutting that case, that bit or tool had to be replaced so many transmissions to keep the uniformity of the groove that the snap ring fits into. And so they kind of went, well, it kind of happened between this range. It was not a given that a car would actually have a problem, but they wanted those. They included those in that range. Most of those transmissions started out with J4, J4A4. I've run across 91, 92s that had a totally different starting transmission number, and the only thing that made sense was the transmission case had been replaced during this update. So the number sequence was slightly different from what you would expect when you read the service bulletin.
So possibly out of range, possibly but satisfied?
Yes, starting with totally different beginning letters and numbers. It'll say in the bulletin that the range on these transmissions occurred from J4A4 1003542 to J4A4 1005978. That was the range. But you might run across a transmission that has like a MC4A. Oh, what the hell is that? That doesn't even fall into this at all. But it was a replacement case for the transmission. So obviously it was done at some point. So on the sites and the sellers, you can ask for additional photographs. And luckily, in the case of like Bring a Trailer, you'll have people piping in and asking questions also, which are helpful.
Yeah, they're there to make sure, buyer beware, right. Buyer educated.
Right, which is what NSX members should do. I've seen cars come up that I'll run the VIN number and go, shit, I know this car. It was totaled. And all of a sudden it crops up. It's like, what the hell? It's back on the market. Buyer beware.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up the other thing. So buying online, obviously, you look, ask questions. Hopefully people will pipe in and give you assistance. The other, if a particular car is posted and it happens to be in Ohio, posting on Prime or online and saying, hey, I'm looking at this car in Ohio. Is anybody from that area, or does anybody know of this car? And this is kind of a big issue. If you're a current NSX owner and you belong to NSXCA, you have somewhat, I feel, an obligation to assist others that are looking to buy an NSX.
Absolutely.
It's the only fair thing to do. So somebody could reach, you could see that and say, hey, yeah, matter of fact, I know this car. Or, no, I'm in the area and I could take a look at it for you. which would be the right thing to do. That's where membership really becomes kind of a critical component in the ownership experience of having an NSX. Is all the wealth of knowledge and all the help there is out there can be accessed if you've always been an NSX lover. You don't have to necessarily own one to belong to the club. I think you and I have both experienced. I belonged to the BMW club and Porsche club and Alfa Romeo club. And I sat on the board of BMW, Badger BMW, for a while, even though I didn't have a BMW. But, there's, you can still be involved in the club and get a lot of good information before buying, just
Right.
because of the network of people, which I think is important. But so that's another avenue. If a car's in an area, you can reach out and say, hey, is anybody from Ohio that knows this car or can look at this car? And that's another possibility. The other thing, most cars that are listed online are going to show a Carfax. A lot of them do, because a lot of people ask. Do you have a Carfax? Well, if there isn't a Carfax, you can go online and order a report via the VIN. It's $40 to $90, depending on how much of a report you want.
Right.
Or you can call your local dealer. Most dealers are all Carfax connected, and ask somebody there, would you mind running this VIN number for me? Doesn't cost them a dime. And get the report. Now, I've always been hugely skeptical of Carfax because it doesn't show shit. It says car has no accidents or damage, no flood damage, no this, no that. And that's totally, in a lot of cases, untrue. The other problem with Carfax, if a dealership like Acura Brookfield, where I worked, is signed up for Carfax, on a nightly basis, Carfax will go in and pull your service records to add it to their Carfax listing when you order a report on a car. Except they're only pulling minor details. They can't pull the whole repair order. They're just looking at job codes.
Sure.
So 02 ACZ LOF is an oil change. And they can pick that up and it says oil change. But anything else that they do to the car, for suspension, it could be 43 ACZ or 34 ACZ, and then nothing. It just says that. Not good information. But the purpose of a Carfax is it gives you a starting point where the car was sold and how many owners had the car. And that's good information. Sometimes they put the mileage down, so when the car is first bought, they'll put the mileage in, let's say 92 miles. And then any renewal registration mileage doesn't show up. You'll just see that years go by. And where Carfax really comes in handy is when you start seeing the registrations flip-flopping all over the country. That's a major red flag.
Like a lot of owners.
Well, a lot of owners, but a lot of different states. So,
like auction cars.
When it normally would say sold at auction. But let's say the car was bought in Chicago, 92 miles. 2 years later, the car is retitled in California, and it's got maybe a year or two on it. And then it ends up in New York, and then down to Florida, and then it's someplace else. So since all states have different branding laws, what they consider salvage or a repaired salvage car or flood damage or typical accidents you won't see on a Carfax.
Right.
It's pretty rare. A lot of NSX owners will not run their cars through an insurance company. They'll fix them on their own. That never shows up. But when you see a car bouncing, like for instance, back in the day, if a car had a branded title, you could register it in New York and the title will come out clean. Shows nothing.
Mm.
Or you could title it in Florida and the title comes clean because the requirements are different from other states. So it's called the washing the title. They'll clean it. But if you see that on a Carfax where it's been all over the place, there's a problem. There's something. It's a sign that something's not quite right. It just throws a major red flag.
What about, so you said something really important about if someone's available to go out and look at it, because I've done that with almost every vehicle that I've purchased, because it wasn't always a possibility. Because I flew somewhere that was basically a one-way cab ride, 2 hours in the middle of Russell Springs, Kentucky. And I had to rely on the guy selling it, and it wasn't everything that it should have been. But at that point, I made it home. So, but what about the pre-purchase inspection?
Well, okay. So, in cases where clients call me, say I'm looking at buying a car out in California, and it really looks nice, and I'd like to have it inspected, then I'll reach out to people I know in California and say, okay, this is where the car is located. What shops do you know personally that you feel are qualified to look at an NSX? And they'll say, well, this shop is here and this shop is there, and it's quite a distance. And if you can get it into, and then that's part of the problem. You got to talk to the owner and say, hey, I want the car pre-inspected, and I'd like you to take it to this place. He's like, well, shit, that's 4 hours away.
Right.
In a lot of places on a pre-purchase inspection is going to charge for that service, and the owner's not going to want to pay for it. So, that can create a problem. I've had it done, and I've called the shop and say, listen, I have a client that wants to buy an NSX. It's located in this area. Would you be willing to do a pre-purchase inspection? They said, yeah, we can do that. And then we arrange with the owner and get the car there, and they go through it. That's one option. You could always take it to a dealer. The problem with dealers is most of the original NSX technicians have now retired. And so finding a capable technician, you can always call the dealership and say, hey, I've got an NSX that I want to have inspected. You have somebody that's qualified to do that. Sometimes they'll say no. Sometimes they say yes. How much experience does this technician have? Even dealerships aren't particularly capable of doing a proper PPI, just from lack of working on them.
What can a PPI capture?
What can it?
What can it not? And then do people interpret PPI differently? So your PPI might be the same or different than Science of Speeds, which might be the same or different than what Acura has their certified tech there and what they're told that they need to go down the checklist.
It's going to vary from shop to shop, dealer to dealer. There's a huge spread. So when I had the dealership, anybody that wanted to have a PPI done, it was free of charge. And we spent a good amount of time going through the car thoroughly. The reason for it, if I was doing a PPI on an NSX, I wanted to be as thorough as humanly possible, because chances are, if you bought the car, it'd be coming back to me.
Right.
And so, one, I had to be very thorough on the inspection because I didn't want them coming back and say, oh, well, we found something else. It had to be very thorough. Now, one, I'm trying to protect my client from making a mistake. It also, if you're a client of mine and you're selling your NSX, I would hear about it. And then people would start calling me on it.
Right.
There's a car in your area. Have you seen it? Yes. And he goes, well, I'd like to have it pre-inspected. And I said, fine. So you call the owner up and say, hey, Frank, client called me, wants this car inspected. And he would say, well, geez, I was just in there 3 months ago. And going, that doesn't matter. The car has to be brought back in. Well, why? That's bullshit. I said, no, it's not, because I don't know what you've been doing the last 3 months.
A lot can happen in 3 months.
So if you don't, if you don't want to bring it in, I'll tell the prospective buyer that you don't want to. But that's foolish. Bring it in. I'm not going to charge you. I just want to make sure it's right for the next guy. And if I give it a clean bill of health, all the better for you. You'll sell the car. It's just, it's equal for the buyer and seller. I want to do the right thing for both parties. But I'll tell you, Jay, over the years, there's been NSXs in my area that have never come to my shop. Ever. Why do you think that is? They're hiding.
Yeah, they know.
They're hiding something. In fact, I had an NSX in Milwaukee. I was on the market for 2 years. And I knew the guy that owned this used car lot. It was a big place. And I called him up one day and I said, listen, I'm getting a lot of phone calls on this car. I said, why don't you have you guys bring it over? Let me do an inspection on it. And that way, when these people call, I can say, yes, I've looked at the car and it only had 4,000 miles on it. I'll give it if it's a clean car, I'll give it a clean bill of health. It'll be a lot easier for you to sell it. He goes, no, I'll pass on that. I went, really? Okay. Another year goes by and the shop shows up at my garage after I left the dealership. We opened Stereo Motorsports.
Right.
This red NSX pulls up. I said, can I help you? And he goes, well, I was just out test driving this car and I was wondering if you could take a look at it. And I went, oh my God, it's this car. I said, I can't believe he allowed you to drive it. He goes, yeah. So I get in the car. I went, oh shit. What's wrong? I said, you can't smell that mice urine?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I noticed something was a little weird. I said, no, this car is soaked in urine. The smell is like gagging me.
Right.
So I went through a quick, because he had to get back. So I turned the radio on. Radio didn't work. Speakers didn't work.
Wow. Climate
control didn't work. It was missing. It's just, I think I came up with 34 things the car needed.
Oh, wow. That's
guy still bought it, but it was crazy. No wonder it never came to my dealership or the shop. He didn't want it out.
The guy still bought it. That was his bargaining chip when he went back.
Well, he bought it, brought it to me. We did a shitload of work on it. Tried to deal with as much mouse debris as possible. Couldn't get rid of the smell. So he said, his wife calls me because he was in ill health many years later. And she goes, we're putting the car for sale. And we wanted to post all the service records. I said, well, okay, if you want to do that, you have to post that this vehicle had mice in it and that there is a odor. He said, well, we're not going to do that. I said, well, then you're not using my service records in your post. I said, that's not allowed. So must have been 6 months later, I'm on Bring a Trailer and I see the car. So I'm reading through it. This was done, this was done, you know. No mention of the mouse smell. And in the documents, they covered up my reparator, but they left my name on the top, Asteri Motorsports. And then all of a sudden people chimed in, oh, if it was serviced over at Asteri,
Right.
I wouldn't worry about it.
You know,
and I was so fucking pissed. Going, you have to disclose this. You can't do this to somebody.
Right.
And nope. And he sold that car for a ton, almost $100,000.
Wow.
And I was just like totally pissed. But I've had that happen over and over again with clients who, you know, I do all the work on it and call me up and say, oh, I found some really cheap tires. I'm going to order them for the car. I said, what are they? Oh, there's some BF Goodrich. They're really reasonable. I said, no, you're not. What do you mean? I said, the car had Bridgestones. And that's what you're putting on the car. You go, oh, I don't want to spend that much more. I said, well, either you spend the money and do it right, or again, you cannot use any of my reparators in your listing, period. Don't cheap out and, you know, do the right thing. And they did. But it's like, come on.
So this is going to sound like a probably a strange question as a follow-up to that, but is there an engineering reason why you wouldn't want to do that? Or is it because it wasn't the tires it came with, because it was engineered that way with those specific tires?
Well, of this particular NSX, it had the Bridgestones on an OE.
Okay.
And it was still available. So it would be like putting a set of Kumo or Hankook or God knows what else on your car. And it just kind of looks like, really? You know, it just kind of rubs a potential buyer the wrong way when things are cheapened. When you see that in a car or somebody is, you know, they use aftermarket parts for, like, you know, the air filter or fuel filter or oil filter, or it's just like, okay, why is this aftermarket stuff on the car and who is servicing it? It just raises another question mark.
Right.
It doesn't really need to be there. You know, it's...
Or some of the OEM parts they're there because it could have been contractual, kind of like Brembo. Brembo's on everything because they probably outbid somebody else versus necessarily being the best.
Well...
Like, aren't there quality third-party things and super cheap as hell third-party things?
There are. Far and few between. It's one that really rubs me the wrong way is when I inspect the NSX and it's got aftermarket wiper blades on it. And it's like, do you know you can buy the rubber inserts for these for $7? But yet you put a Trico blade on there and the driver's side one doesn't have the winglet. And it's like, why did you do that? Because now if you go to buy the factory blades, they're not cheap. You know, on my NSX, I've got the factory blades, they're brand new with, you know, brand new wiper inserts. And I have a set of wiper inserts in the trunk because I switch them out every 6 months. And they're dirt cheap. You just pull them out and put them in.
That brought up something. So, with the wiper blades, I don't think anyone switches them out unless they get the streaks and they're doing crappy. But because it's a rubber item, it's probably a good idea to switch them out regardless.
Yeah, I do mine every spring and fall. Well, on my normal cars. The NSX is a little bit different, but nothing more annoying than having a streaking windshield. And having the spares in the trunk, I can just flip them out at any point in time. But on my personal cars, it's every spring, like now, and then every just before winter, I put new blades, wiper inserts in. And again, it's just dirt cheap. And we don't have to worry about it. I don't have to wait until that snow day where I can't see shit.
Right.
You know, and I have to go someplace to get. And that's the situation. You get into a situation where you can't see crap. And so you run over to the auto parts store and they sell you a set of blades. So you take yours off and put these on. And it's not the same quality. And it's not the right blade. It's just, you know.
Right.
So we talked about Carfax.
Yep.
Again, tracking a car, where it's been. The thing I used to do, so clients would call me and say, I'm looking at a car in Georgia. And so I'd run the Carfax. Say, okay, car sold in Georgia. And it would sometimes show service by X dealer. And so say, give me a little bit of time. Let me research this. I would pull the registration from Acura corporate to see when the vehicle was built and sold. So everything jived. And then I would start calling the dealer listed on the Carfax and say, this is John, service director at Acura Brookfield. Looking at an NSX in your area. This is the VIN number. Can you pull up surface history?
Mm.
And they go, yeah, it was in here for this, this, and this. I said, okay, how many records do you have? Would you mind faxing those to me or emailing them to me so I can see them? And then if there's gaps of time in between where there was no records, I would call the next Georgia dealership and say, run this VIN number, see if you ever sold it or serviced it. So I would call around and try to get as much information as I could, because in a lot of cases, service records weren't available from the owner, which is, again, incredibly annoying. So another thing for current NSX owners, I have to stress that, you may have had your car for 10 years, but you have the service records for all that work that you did over a period of 10 years. And if you don't, I suggest you finding them through the dealer or places that you had your car serviced, and compiling a records book, document everything you did, because at some point, chances are you'll sell the car or someone in your family might get the car. But having those records are golden to somebody buying a car. I just did one on Matt's car after it was bought on Bring a Trailer. I did it in a leather-bound binder, embossed with his, it was the Acura logo, 1991 Acura NSX, VIN number. And then there was 10 categories broken down: engine, transmission, suspension, brakes, interior. Everything was broken down. There's 200 pages of information I had in that binder of the condition the car was received in and the things that needed to be addressed. And one of the things that stood out, it's not the first time I've seen this, in the Bring a Trailer ad, indicated that the time belt water pump had been done 2 years ago. Oh, good. But I didn't look at it until after the car was in my possession. I went back on and started looking at the photographs, trying to see why I couldn't see what I was seeing on the car.
Right.
When I went down to the service reparator, it was done by an independent in Texas, time belt water pump. And for the timing, for the water pump part number, they had the factory part number. And price of the water pump was $80.48.
That's cheap. No.
Yeah, wholesale
Quality
on a
parts.
water pump. Wholesale on a factory water pump is $484.
Right.
It had the timing belt part number and the correct price. But When I took the car apart, it had an aftermarket timing belt on it. So the shop obviously charged him full retail for an aftermarket timing belt. They also damaged the timing covers. They left all the gaskets off the timing covers because they couldn't get them in with the motor in its normal state. So they tried to force them in and crack some of the covers. The whole thing was a basket case. No valve cover gaskets. They reused the old ones. They were leaking. Cam plugs were leaking. VTEC solenoids were leaking. Galley plugs in the motor were leaking. Oil pan was crushed. And you couldn't see it from the photo that they took. It just went on and on. It's just like, what the hell? So, having, if I had looked at that car before it was bought and examined and repaired her, I would have known instantly something was amiss. But
are you hanging in there?
Who, me?
Mm.
All right. I'm trying to think. So, getting somebody in the area of the car that's being sold to look at it is critical.
Right.
And, most NSX owners can look at a body, paint, and we can discuss some of that. Some of the paint things are going to be obvious. Mismatched color. Front bumpers are common for being repainted. But if you look through the opening where the radiator sits behind it, you see all these vertical uprights.
Right.
They're all black. Well, 90% of the time, when a bumper's painted, the painter doesn't think about it. He shoots the whole bumper and all the verticals. So on a red bumper, all the verticals are red. It's like, oh, they painted the bumper. All of it.
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you can pick that out on any color except for black. Yeah. The one thing I look at very closely, if you pop the hood on an early NSX, you've got that front radiator support, and it ties into the headlight buckets. If you lift the headlights up and look down between the radiator support and the headlight bucket, you'll be looking at the unibody frame rail sitting right there. And if you look closely, you'll see a bunch of weld spots, and they're about the size of a dime and very uniform. And you can find those all over the car. The point is, if an NSX gets hit in the front or the back, and those rails have to be replaced or bent or repaired, there's not a shop that can duplicate that spot weld. It's impossible because the equipment that Honda had to buy to perform that spot welding is very specific to the NSX to get that penetration and that size. So when a shop goes to repair that, you'll see some cobbled weld in those areas. It just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Mm-hmm.
You can find that in the trunk. You can find it another area. If you lift up the trunk, obviously the trunk struts and the hatch struts are temperamental, so those sometimes will fail. But the hinges for the trunk lid are bolted to the quarter panels. And if I see a hinge sitting up slightly from the quarter panel, I'll take a look. If there's a washer underneath it, it's been involved in an accident. Because the strange thing about the early NSX, there were no washers. aligning fender to hood or door to fender or quarter panel. They're precise fit components. And you can also look at the bolts that hold those things together to see if there's been a wrench or a socket put on it. Unlike your version of the NSX, there are washers and shims listed for that car to get things to fit correctly. So
There's shims all over the place, I would guess.
yeah, I think it was the third NSX we got in 2017 during the TQI, Technical Quality Inspection. Mm-hmm. Next week comes up to me and says, "You got to take a look at this." I said, "What?" He goes, "They never bolted the right front fender down." It's like, what? So we called model engineer. He goes, "Oh, thanks for letting us know. You're obviously going to have to go in the parts department and figure out the shim thickness that you need for that fender." "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, you're going to have to shim the fender up to match the hood." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, it's part of the process." It's just like, okay. It's like, wow, never had to do that before.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I guess the biggest part is, and even, again, if you're not an NSX owner joining the NSX club, if that's the car you really want, it's going to be hugely beneficial. And going at NSX Prime and going, "Listen, I'm a new member. I'm looking at a car in this area. Does anybody know the car, or can anybody help me with an inspection?" And knowing NSX owners, they'll typically bend over backwards to help the new guy out. And I've seen it in the past. Somebody posts a VIN number, and then somebody says, "Oh, I know that car. Yeah, that got pretty racked up."
Sure.
It's like, shit. And there used to be a list of NSX VIN numbers that were damaged cars.
Actually, those are the posts that people like, "Look, here it is." And they'll send you a picture of it at the scrapyard. Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I always found those kind of fun posts.
Exactly.
This thing has never been in a wreck. Oh, really?
I've seen that come across Springer Trailer numerous times where somebody pipes in and goes, "Wait a minute. This Sonardi you're selling was damaged." And call a guy out. And, "Well, I didn't know anything about it." And it's like, "Well, it was." It's just like, oh my God. I was getting shot in the foot. Again, it's kind of a hard call as to where to take it, dealer, independent.
I think one of the big things is just having somebody available or willing to go take a look at it.
Right.
Because you never know. It could be seller negligence, or seller may not even know.
Oh, true. Yeah, that is the case. I had another client of mine. I never met him, but he called me and said, "I'm buying a car out in California that is really perfect. It's what I want." And I said, "Well, did you get it pre-inspected?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I already bought the car." Oh, Jesus. I said, "Okay, let me make some calls." And I said, hey, I found a shop that everybody out in California recommends. Why don't you take it over there, make arrangements with the owner? And the owner said, "Fine, I'll take it there." So I called the shop and said, "This is who I am. I'm representing this client that bought the car. I want you to do a proper pre-purchase inspection." And they sounded reasonable and helpful. So the owner calls me back and says, "Well, it needs about $12,000 worth of work." I went, "What?" He said, well, they found a bad head gasket. What? He said, yeah. They said, it needs a head gasket, needs this, needs that. So I called the shop back. I said, excuse me. How did you find a bad head gasket? Oh, well, kind of a stupid story. So I called the owner back and I said, listen, bring it back to me. I'll go through it. I said, that's not right. There's something bad wrong there. And sure as shit, his bill came out to about $4,800. Because the head gasket was a complete bullshit, along with a bunch of other things that they had found. And I thought, that's really depressing. I mean, NSX owners told me to take it there and that they're, the guys. And they basically tried to screw them. It's like, fuck.
It's the reason why nobody's car is sorted correctly in that area, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But hopefully there's not too many of those floating around. But
I think that's pretty good info for today's session. I want to get into aftermarket, if I want to do, the next time we talk, kind of like you did, do I want wheels? If so, what do I really need to look at? Do I need an upper bar and a lower bar? Do I need all this stuff? Because, a lot of guys, they get it and they're like, okay, I want this spoiler, I want this upper brace, this Mugen lower brace, I want these special non-compliance clamps on my suspension, and I want so-and-so special billet motor mounts. We're going to do all that stuff unless we know better, and most people don't know any better. So, having a study motorsport, you get to see all that stuff. So I think it'd be kind of cool to talk about that next time we get into it.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not going to make some friends during that discussion, but yeah.
It's important to have.
It is. Well, a different viewpoint. Like I said, when I had the shop, I spent most of my time talking people out of things, going, no, you don't need that. And no, that compliance clamp was actually put there for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't pull that out of their ass.
Yeah.
It's like so many things on the NSX, cams, useless. There's just so many things that guys do. And some of it is aesthetics. I can understand that. Short shifters, for instance, on the early cars, I hate it.
It's such a nice throw already.
It's a nice throw. And the reason that throw is there is, in fact, we just ran into that on our MR2 race car. The Grosscock brothers put a K24 in it, took the Toyota motor out, and they matched it with a 6-speed trans. Well, gating on a 6-speed, as you well know, is quite close. And on a manual, a lot closer than it was on a 5-speed. And when you're going for shifts, that extra throw allows you a moment of time to be able to make a better shift. When you shorten the throw, it is so quick that if you make a mistake, you're going to do some hub selector damage or gear damage. And what's the big benefit there, guys? You need to shift normally when you go into gear, not speed shift it into gear because it's quicker.
Right.
It just... and that was the problem we had on the MR2. So I told the guys, I said, take and put a 2.5 to 3 inch sleeve on the shifter to raise the shifter up as far as the knob. And that would automatically increase your throw distance and make it easier to get into gear. And it did. It didn't have to be, that short little snubby thing that you're... And half the time I go, well, what gear am I in? It's like, shit. It's just so close. You have to be really, really careful.
Right.
With a short shifter. It's not worth it. But
all right. Well,
so many things. Yeah. You let me bounce?
Let you bounce. That means go.
It means I'll probably fall down the stairs going down to the kitchen. Uh-huh.
I got to get prepared here and get packed up and drive out to Long Beach.
Oh, you're going out there?
Going out there, yep. Then I'll be back I'll be back Sunday afternoon, finish all this other shit I have to do, and then work a regular day Monday, and then fly out Tuesday.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to Spain and Portugal. So
Ooh.
I'm out until May 10th. So I got a lot of shit
Nice.
to do.
Well, good. Have a great time. Say hi to everybody at Long Beach.
Will do. People that I see.
Shit track. But, yeah, have a good time.
Thanks, John.
Don't drink too much.
I'll try not to.
Well, you're going to be with Peter, right?
I don't think so. I'll be lucky if I see him. I think he's going to be super busy doing a bunch of shit out there. So
Yeah.
I think you'd mentioned maybe doing something Sunday later on, but no, I'm coming back Sunday. I can't afford to hang out. I got to fucking go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, enjoy your trip. And,
Talk to you on the
thank
flip
you
side.
for your time.
Thank you for your time. We'll talk on the other side.
Okie dokie.
Later.
See you, bud. Bye.
Very clean. What do you have to say for yourself?
I'm kind of happy.
I want to thank Jake for jumping on at kind of the last minute. That conversation was brought to you by Arcus Foundry. Business tech feeling whack, too many tools, too much chaos, and not enough time. Arcus Foundry is here to fix that. With SparkForge, you get a unified platform that connects everything you need, your website, social media, phone systems, and more. No need for an expensive IT department or dealing with a bunch of separate systems. It's the all-in-one solution that saves you time and helps your business run smoother. Head over to arcusfoundry.com and use the code HARDPARKED to get your first month free, upgrade your tech, and get back to business. Again, I hope that you didn't just stream the audio. You went to YouTube, if possible, and watched the video because there were some amazing images. Special thanks to Mary Bush, Peter Cunningham, Jake Cole, Matt Cole, Leon Schmidt, Chris Willson, Ken Sachs, Bryan Hunter, and Dr. Ajay Sharma. AJ has been spending a lot of time on the phone with me over the past few months after NSXPO, kind of keeping me in the fold, as well as Peter and Jake. Also, last but not least, thank you so much, Emma, his daughter, for allowing me to use some of those images as well. You had some gems, absolute gems. You know, John's passing is a huge loss, not just for the NSX community, but just for everyone that knew him personally. The Hard Parking Podcast, a little bit of cars, and so much more, available anywhere you get your podcast, or check it out at hardparkingpod.com.